The question that terrifies Christians. Christians are cowards. They are terrified of the truth. To demonstrate this, a proposition is offered for your consideration. No Christian dares address it. The proposition of damnation. The Bible has solutions for every problem, without exception. Some solutions are implicit, others explicit. Regardless, the Bible does solve every problem. The vehicle for the implementation of these solutions is the church. Therefore, it follows the church properly constructed is the answer to all problems humans have encountered. Apologetic, the science that constructs the church from the lies of the world, makes the church manifest. If there are problems not fixed by the church, the only possible conclusion is, we are not the church described in the Bible, particularly the church of Matt 18:15-19. Either God cannot solve every problem, which denies the validity of Matt 5:48, or we are not the church the Bible describes. Which is it? How did the world create problems not even God can find a solution to, or why have Christians chosen not to build the church God has commanded us to be and become? It's a dichotomy and not a very complicated one, but Christians hide from it and refuse to address it. Either God cannot or will not solve our problems and we have to live as the world lives, or we are not the church. If we are not the church, then Matt 18:15-19 is of no effect. Perhaps in this light we can better understand Luke 18 verse 8. The question is, how can we be the light on the hill, Matt 5:14-16, if we do not separate, 2 Corinthians 6 verse 17? How can we be perfected if we are of the world and enmeshed in the same institutions and activities that the world is in? We are of the world unless we separate from the world. All of this might be considered moot if you are of this world and do not entertain the idea of a church that can solve problems. It does not take a lot of thinking to realize that if we solved our problems we would be perfected. This is based on the reasonable assumption we create these problems, they are not part of the natural order. This, however, is not an argument that the problems of the natural order can be solved. These are not our problems but the problem of Satan. These cannot be solved by man because they are not the problems of man. The problems that we are responsible for and which by their elimination perfects us is problems such as unemployment, debt, poverty, inflation, pollution, waste, taxation, homelessness, war, property crime, and the cost of the state generally. Note, all social costs externalize private costs onto society and future generations. This is also called the externalization of costs. What externalities do is turn something private into something public. The public sector is represented by the state, and it is liable for these social costs, for it justifies and enables them. Individuals could not impose private costs onto the public without the assistance of the state. The state is complicit. If the nationalization of social costs is the problem, then privatization is the solution. The church ultimately privatizes all the institutions of man and makes the externalization of costs impossible. It is by this means that we are perfected. If the church prevents the externalization of costs and externalization of costs turns what is private into something public, then the church is a mechanism for privatizing the system we are in. If the state represents public interests and legitimizes the externalization of costs, then the church is the way to replace the state, which results in the privatization of the state and its institutions. Privatization eliminates social costs. This has many faces. To build the church requires we divorce ourselves from all externalities. This is extremely important, it is how we separate from the state and become perfected. However, this is not something we can do as subjects of the state. The importance of this cannot be stressed. There is a reed and hard division between church and state. We cannot attempt to bridge the line of division. This is where everyone flees because capitalism is not a church and private ownership is construed as licensed ownership and a legalistic conception incompatible with the church. Our value is determined by the church, which operates as a private market. We work for God, not for ourselves. Our life is not our own, it belongs to God, not the state. We have to live in faith, and this, as we know, means we do not rely on our ability to amass wealth to acquire security. Luke 12 verse 20. The church operates similar to a trust. Commercial assets and unused and underused equipment and tools and property are provided, in trust, to the church. The deposit is recorded as a debit in the church accounts and a credit to the account of the depositor. The church uses a unit of account based on the equity deposited with the church. This simple step changes everything. It builds the church in faith, as the deposit is a demonstration of the depositor's faith. Having deposited these assets in the church, the depositor has obeyed Christ and sold all he has and followed Jesus. Thus, he is now on the road to perfection, which is a state in which social costs are no longer created. What he does is paid for by the church using the unit of account established by the deposits to the church in trust. The depositor uses these same credits to purchase the goods and services he or she needs. There are no externalized costs, and therefore there is no need for the state. All goods and services, even those previously provided by the state, are provided through the church. If a road, school, or any other social good is needed, the proper group provides what is needed and is paid by the church for the work they do. The state builds nothing and does no work. The difference with the church is that the worker does the work directly without the intervention of the state. Because there are no social costs, there is no ability for the state to be financed, and it has no access to the income of others, so as to use this to bribe the unfit to support a takeover of the economy. Every person gets paid for what they do, and no one is billed for anything he or she did not obtain the full benefit of. In conclusion, a Christian has recourse to two possible responses. He or she can find error in this reasoning and correct it, or he or she can agree with the proposition that God indeed can solve every problem created by man, and therefore admit we have not built the church as commanded us and begin work on its construction. The one thing a Christian qua Christian cannot do is ignore the evidence and arguments and continue to live as they have. However, this is precisely the response made to date. You may wish to take a different path, we will see.